So today, lads, we're going to be talking about Sydney Colson, and she went on to Aaliyah Boston's podcast today and talked about the kind of negativity that she received from being a part of the Indiana Fever. And we all kind of know that that's something that is happening.
Sydney Colson just revealed something that confirms what everyone suspected about the Indiana Fever. She went on Aaliyah Boston's podcast and admitted that joining the Fever brought her more hate than she's ever experienced in her entire career. People turned on her for no reason except that she signed with Indiana. The negativity was so intense that it shocked even a veteran player who's always been well-liked across the league. Should WNBA players face hate just because they choose to play for the Indiana Fever?
Whether I'm playing, we want things to look like what we want them to look like. And I knew coming into this season, once people started talking, once I was here and experiencing it, like, people had a lot to say. There was a lot of negativity.
Sydney Colson, appearing on Aaliyah Boston's podcast, dropped some truth bombs that the WNBA probably wishes had stayed private. Colson talked openly about the negativity she received after joining the Indiana Fever, and she didn't sugarcoat it. She admitted that for the first time in her career, people actively disliked her, and the only reason was because she became part of the Fever organization. That's a wild admission that confirms what Fever players have been dealing with all season, but most haven't been willing to say out loud. Colson explained that she came into the season knowing there might be some attention because of joining the Fever, but she wasn't prepared for the level of hate she actually received. She said that typically throughout her career, people have liked her. She's known for being funny and personable. Even when some people didn't find her humor funny, it was just a difference in sense of humor, not actual dislike or animosity. But joining the Fever changed all of that completely. Suddenly, she was getting waves of negativity from people who'd never had a problem with her before.
And I just looked at it like, I'm not used to this. Typically, I'm the person that people are just like, oh, we love Sid, that's funny, blah, blah, blah. Some people be like, not funny, and I'm like, they don't have a sense of humor. But like, for the most part, for the most part, people have liked me and have admired me from the outside, but that's never made me do the things I do. Like, I do the things that I do because I enjoy my teammates, because I like comedy, because I like whatever I'm doing, not for other people's approval. So once I got here and was experiencing people's disapproval, it didn't really faze me because I still understood. I think I understood even more so.
What makes her comments so significant is that Colson is a veteran player who's been in the league for years. She's played for multiple teams. She's experienced different situations in locker rooms. She's not some young player who doesn't know what normal looks like. So when she says the hate she received after joining the Fever was unlike anything she'd experienced before, that carries weight. She has a basis for comparison, and the Fever situation stands out as uniquely toxic in terms of how fans and other players responded to her signing. Colson made it clear that the negativity didn't come because of anything she did wrong. People hated her for no reason except her association with the Fever. That's the key point. She didn't change as a person. She didn't suddenly become less funny or less likable. She didn't do anything controversial or problematic. Her only crime was signing a contract with Indiana, and that was enough for people to turn on her completely. That reveals just how deep the hatred for the Fever runs among certain segments of WNBA fans and possibly other players.
To not liking you for no reason, I'm probably exactly where I need to be. So once the injury happened, I'm like, once again, this is something that I don't fully get, but this must be where I need to be, sidelined. And it made me an even more vocal leader. It made me pay attention to things maybe that I wasn't paying attention to that other people had going on. So I could be more tapped into if they're having a hard time and I need to come over here and help them out, whether it's mental, physical, whatever. I had to get outside of me. And that was the lesson that I learned in this. I hope it's the one that God wanted me to learn, but yeah, it was just one of those things that nobody wants that to happen, but you still have to move forward and figure out a way to still be, of service to your team.
The interesting part is how Colson processed and responded to that hate. She said once she realized people were disapproving of her for no legitimate reason, it actually confirmed to her that she was exactly where she needed to be. When people hate you without cause, when the animosity is clearly irrational and unjustified, that's often a sign you're doing something right or you're in a position that threatens people who don't want you there. Colson seemed to understand that the hate wasn't really about her at all. It was about what the Fever represent and the fact that the team's success threatens the established order that some people are invested in maintaining.
We all know that that's something that's happening with all these players. Is like they're just not in any way happy as long as they have to publicly hate the Fever. And you know, the only way you can get back into these people's good graces is by pulling a Dewana Bonner. By just not playing for the Fever anymore, it doesn't matter. You have to pull a Dewana Bonner.
Colson also revealed that she genuinely wanted to play for the Fever. This wasn't some reluctant signing or a last resort, because she couldn't get a better offer. She specifically wanted to be in Indiana. She liked Kelsey Mitchell and probably had conversations with her about what the team culture was like. She recognized that she and Caitlin Clark are similar as people and would probably get along well. She saw the Fever as a good fit for her personality and playing style. That makes the hate she received even more absurd. She chose Indiana because she wanted to be there, and people punished her for making that choice. The fact that Colson had to deal with an injury during the season added another layer to her experience. She tore her meniscus and had to sit out significant time. Being sidelined when you just joined a new team and are trying to establish yourself is frustrating under any circumstances. But dealing with that while also being bombarded with undeserved hate from fans and possibly subtle hostility from players on other teams makes it exponentially harder. Colson said the injury forced her to become an even more vocal leader and pay attention to what her teammates were going through so she could support them better. That comment about supporting teammates is telling, because it suggests Colson recognized that her Fever teammates were also dealing with negativity and struggles that might not have been obvious from the outside. She positioned herself as someone who could help her teammates mentally and emotionally get through difficult situations. That's the role of a veteran leader, and it's exactly what the Fever needed. But it also reveals that the toxicity directed at the Fever wasn't just affecting Colson. It was affecting multiple players on the roster who needed support to deal with the unreasonable hatred being thrown their way. Colson's willingness to actually say out loud that people hated her for no reason is refreshing. Most players dance around that reality. They'll acknowledge some negativity but downplay it or try to rationalize it. Colson just laid it out plainly. People hated her because she joined the Fever, full stop. There was no other reason. That honesty is important because it validates what fans who support the Fever have been saying all season. The treatment of Fever players and fans isn't normal. It's not just regular sports rivalry or competition. It's something uglier and more personal. The comparison to Dana Bonner that gets mentioned in discussions about this is particularly interesting. Bonner left the Fever, and suddenly the hate directed at her disappeared. She was welcomed back into the good graces of the broader WNBA community because she was no longer associated with Indiana. That pattern reveals that the hate isn't actually about individual players or their behavior. It's about the Fever organization itself and specifically about its association with Caitlin Clark. Any player who joins the Fever becomes tainted by that association and subject to hate that has nothing to do with them as individuals. This creates an impossible situation for Fever players. They can't win. If they're successful on the court, they get accused of riding Clark's coattails or benefiting from favorable treatment. If they struggle, they get mocked for not being able to keep up with Clark or for being liabilities who hold the team back. If they defend Clark or speak positively about the team culture, they're accused of being fake or trying to use her fame. If they stay quiet, they get accused of being jealous or not supporting their teammate. There's no response that will satisfy the haters because the hate isn't rational to begin with. Colson's comments also highlight how the Fever have become the most polarizing team in WNBA history. They get more love and more hate than any other team simultaneously. That's similar to how major market teams in other sports operate. If you play for the Lakers or Yankees or Cowboys, you're going to be celebrated by your fans and despised by everyone else. The attention and scrutiny are magnified. Every mistake gets blown up. Every success gets dismissed or credited to advantages rather than skill. That's the reality of being on a team that matters more than others. The difference is that, in those other leagues, being on the polarizing team is usually a choice that comes with understanding of what you're signing up for. Players know what it means to be a Laker or Yankee. They know the pressure and attention that come with it. Fever players in 2024 and 2025 didn't necessarily know what they were signing up for because the level of attention and hatred the team receives is unprecedented in WNBA history. Clark's arrival changed everything about what it means to play for Indiana in ways that couldn't have been fully anticipated. The toxic element of WNBA fan culture that Colson's comments expose is deeply problematic for the league's growth. When players can't sign with certain teams without facing harassment and hate for no legitimate reason, that's a problem that leadership needs to address. The WNBA should be celebrating that one of its teams has become so popular and relevant that it generates mainstream attention. Instead, there's this weird resentment from parts of the fan base that seem to prefer the league stay small and niche, rather than grow behind a popular team and player. Colson learning new slurs and insults directed at her for joining the Fever is particularly disturbing. The hate isn't just disagreement or criticism of her playing style or decisions. It's personal attacks and slurs that cross obvious lines of acceptable discourse. That kind of toxicity drives people away from engaging with the sport. It makes the WNBA look petty and unwelcoming rather than exciting and inclusive. League officials should be embarrassed that their players are experiencing this kind of treatment, but there's been no real effort to call it out or address it. The comment about Lexi Hull also getting hate is another example of how irrational the anti-Fever sentiment has become. Hull is a role player who works hard and does her job. She's not someone who talks trash or creates drama. Yet she gets hate simply for being on the roster and being close friends with Clark. That's absurd. Role players on popular teams shouldn't be subjected to harassment just because they play alongside a star. But that's the reality in the current WNBA environment, where association with the Fever and Clark specifically makes you a target. The fact that Colson mentioned she does what she does because she enjoys her teammates and not for other people's approval is the right mindset for dealing with irrational hate. You can't let people who hate you for no reason dictate your choices or affect your happiness. Colson understands that the negativity says more about the people directing it than it does about her. She's secure enough in herself to recognize that and not let it change how she approaches her role with the team. That's emotional maturity that younger players might struggle with in the same situation. The point about teams not respecting the Fever and paying for it is accurate based on how the season played out. Multiple teams clearly underestimated Indiana, expecting easy wins because they bought into the narrative that the Fever were just Clark and a bunch of role players who couldn't compete. Those teams got embarrassed when the Fever came out and played hard, executed well, and won games they weren't supposed to win. The lack of respect was obvious, and it cost teams wins when they didn't prepare properly or take Indiana seriously. When Clark was injured and out of the lineup, the pattern became even clearer. Teams that showed up and played the Fever seriously won those games handily. Teams that assumed they'd coast to victory without the star player often lost, because the rest of the roster was better than people gave them credit for. That proves the Fever weren't just a one-player team, but the narrative had already been set, and many teams and fans refused to adjust their perception even when evidence contradicted it. The social media advice about using the following tab instead of For You page is solid. Professional athletes really shouldn't be consuming random social media commentary about themselves, especially the day after games. The algorithm is designed to show you engagement, which often means showing you the most inflammatory and negative takes because those generate reactions. Switching to following means you only see content from people you've chosen to follow, which you can curate to be supportive or at least reasonable rather than toxic. But realistically, asking young athletes to completely disconnect from social media isn't feasible in the modern era. Their brands are built on social platforms. Their endorsement value often depends on their social media presence and engagement. They're expected to interact with fans and promote their sponsors online. Drop a like and subscribe for more reality checks on WNBA business moves.